Single dad CEO accidentally hires wrong music teacher for his daughter, discovers she's a struggling single mom. The phone rang just as Mark Bennett was clicking through the final slide of his investor pitch. His assistant glanced at the screen, frowned, then handed it over. One look at the caller ID, Lucy's school, made his stomach drop. 2 minutes later, Mark's chair was empty. The boardroom behind him faded as he rushed through the lobby, car keys already in hand. At the elementary school, he found Lucy curled up in the nurse's office, clutching her faded, stuffed bear. Her breathing was shallow, eyes red and swollen. She had a panic episode during recess, the counselor explained gently. Some kids asked why she never talks about her mom. Mark crouched beside his daughter, brushing a golden strand of hair from her face. "I'm here," he whispered. "Daddy's here." That evening, the Bennett home, with its clean lines, cold marble floors, and untouched furniture, felt more like a gallery than a place where a child could truly heal. Mark lingered by Lucy's bedroom door, watching her sit silently on the bed. She clutched her bare eyes, staring at nothing. "She needs more than just therapy," he murmured. Mrs. Doyle, their longtime housekeeper, paused beside him. "She needs to feel safe again." Mark nodded. "Music? Maybe something she doesn't have to explain." Mrs. Doyle pulled out her phone. "I know a music center. I'll arrange something for tomorrow." By morning, a lesson was scheduled with Amanda Rowan, a local piano teacher known for working with anxious children. Her first session was set for 5:00 p.m., but at 4:30 p.m., Amanda sent an apologetic email. Her mother had just been hospitalized, and she couldn't make it. Mrs. Doyle, preoccupied with picking Lucy up from another tense school day, never checked her email. By the time they returned home, she was focused on getting Lucy inside, fed, and settled. She glanced at the clock and began prepping the music room, unaware that the lesson had been canceled. At 5 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang. Hannah Miles stood on the porch, her hair wind-blown, cheeks flushed from the cold. She wore a dark coat, a black satchel over one shoulder, and a brown paper bag in hand. "Uber Eats for Bennett?" she asked, uncertain. Mrs. Doyle answered, slightly flustered. She took one look at Hannah, punctual, neatly dressed, with a soft, kind smile, and beamed. "You must be Amanda. Thank you for coming on such short notice. She's had a tough week." Hannah blinked. "Actually, I think she's in the piano room down the hall, first door on the right." Before Hannah could explain, Mrs. Doyle was already disappearing into the kitchen. Confused but too polite to protest, Hannah stepped inside. The house was quiet and immaculate, each room more elegant than the last. Her boots squeaked against the polished floor. The paper bag crinkled in her hand. "What am I doing?" She took a tentative step into the piano room. Light streamed through sheer curtains onto white walls and a gleaming baby grand. And on the bench, a little girl sat alone, clutching a stuffed bear head, bowed. Hannah hesitated, still unsure. Then she heard the sound, a soft, hiccuped sob. Lucy didn't notice her right away. She was curled in on herself, small and still, like she was trying to disappear. Hannah stepped closer. Lucy finally looked up, her eyes red and puffy. "Do you?" she asked in a trembling voice. "Do you know how to play Twinkle, Twinkle?" A lump rose in Hannah's throat. She hadn't touched a piano since her first year of college, before she dropped out to care for her mother and newborn son. But something in Lucy's voice, so fragile, so familiar, called to her. "I think I do," she said gently. She placed the bag down, slid onto the bench, and let her fingers hover over the keys. She began slowly, uncertainly finding the melody, one note at a time. Her touch was rusty but honest. Lucy watched closely. Her shoulders relaxed, and then, just barely, she smiled. Upstairs, Mark ended his call and headed down to meet the new teacher. As he reached the bottom step, he stopped. There was a stranger sitting beside his daughter, not Amanda, but Lucy was swaying gently, calm, peaceful, her fingers brushing the keys beside the woman's, her eyes bright. Mark stood still in the hallway, unseen. He didn't speak, didn't interrupt. He just listened, and for the first time in a very long time, hope crept quietly into the house. A thought flickered in his chest. Maybe this was the right person, even if it all began by mistake. Hannah stepped out of the Bennett house and into the crisp evening air, her heart pounding. The door closed softly behind her, but the notes of "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star" still echoed in her chest. What just happened? She had come to deliver food, somehow ended up at a piano, played a lullaby, and made a little girl smile. Not just any girl. A girl the housekeeper said hadn't smiled in months. It should have felt wrong, like a mistake. But in that quiet room with that child's tear-streaked face slowly turning toward joy, it hadn't felt like a mistake at all. Still, guilt twisted in her stomach. She was not a teacher. She wasn't supposed to be there. What if they found out? What if they thought she lied? As she reached her old bike, Hannah glanced back. The warm glow from the window spilled out like something from another life, a safe, steady world that didn't belong to her. That night, Hannah sat on the floor of a small, cluttered one-bedroom in a transitional housing unit. Her son Noah, 5 years old, slept on the couch wrapped in a worn dinosaur blanket. She stared at her phone. Another rejection email, a cleaning job she desperately needed. Gone. Rent was overdue. Utilities were on their final warnings. Tomorrow's delivery shifts would help, but not enough. Not nearly enough. She remembered the housekeeper's words as she had walked out. "Same time tomorrow. Lucy would love to see you again." Hannah had nodded, not knowing what to say. Now in the quiet of her dim apartment, she whispered, "Just one more lesson for the girl, yes, but maybe also for herself." The next day at 5:00 p.m. sharp, she stood once again at the Bennett home. Her coat was tidied hair, pulled back, hands clean. She had spent the morning going over piano scales in her head, reviewing every scrap of college music theory she could remember. Mrs. Doyle opened the door with a warm smile. "Come in, dear. Lucy's been at the piano all afternoon waiting." The music room was just as polished and beautiful as before. White walls, shiny floors, the soft light touching the Steinway upright near the window. Hannah paused for a moment, letting the surreal feeling wash over her. She didn't belong here, but she stepped in anyway. Lucy was already on the bench, bare feet, dangling legs swinging. She looked up, unreadable for a beat, then gave Hannah a small nod. "Can we learn a new song?" she asked. Hannah smiled gently. "I know a special one, but let me tell you a story first." Lucy leaned in, curious. "My mom used to sing this to me when I was scared of thunderstorms," Hannah said. "She wasn't a great singer, actually. She was pretty terrible," she added with a small laugh, "but I believed her voice could chase the lightning away." She placed her fingers on the keys and began to play slowly, haltingly, but with feeling, a tune from childhood, imperfect but sincere. Lucy listened, eyes soft. Her fingers inched along the bench toward Hannah's. Finally, she reached out and gently touched her hand. "I like it," she whispered, "even if it's not perfect." Hannah's chest tightened, her throat thick with emotion. From the hallway, Mark stood silently, coffee mug in hand. He had come to check on the new teacher, but stopped short. Through the open door, he saw Lucy sitting closer than ever to the woman with the golden hair, their shoulders nearly touching. Lucy's head tilted toward her, fully present, fully calm. She looked safe. Mark slowly sat on the stairs, his coffee forgotten. He listened to the melody, wobbly a bit, unsure, but it filled the house with something long, missing warmth, life. His jaw unclenched, his shoulders lowered. For the first time in months, his eyes softened. And in that moment, as the song gently faded, Mark thought, maybe healing didn't have to start with a therapist or a treatment plan. Maybe, just maybe, it began with the wrong person showing up at the exact right time. On her third visit, Hannah arrived with a small container wrapped in a clean dish towel. Inside were slightly overbaked oatmeal cookies made with the last of her flour and sugar, shaped by careful hands and quiet hope. Mrs. Doyle welcomed her with a warm nod. "She's been at the piano since noon, just waiting." Hannah stepped quietly into the music room. Lucy looked up, eyes brightening at the sight of her. "I brought something," Hannah said softly, placing the container on the windowsill. "You told me store cookies smell weird. These don't come from a store." Lucy opened the lid and sniffed. "They smell like cinnamon," she whispered. Then, clutching the container to her chest, she smiled. "They smell like home." They sat at the piano without a word. No lesson plan, no warm-up scales, just presence. Lucy's fingers wandered along the keys, uncertain but searching. Hannah watched, then gently joined in, adding quiet harmony, not guiding but following. "I had a dream last night," Lucy said suddenly. "Mommy was calling me, but she was in the fog, and then she disappeared again." Hannah's hand stilled. She looked at the little girl beside her, her heart tightening. "What if we made a song for that dream?" she asked, "but made it safer, softer, a version where Mommy stays?" Lucy's eyes searched hers. "What note would you start with?" Hannah asked. The girl pressed middle C, and from that one note something began. Lucy tried another, then another, clumsy and slow but raw and honest. Hannah scribbled the notes down on the back of a shopping receipt. They built the song together, a lullaby of memory and longing. When they finished, Lucy whispered, "It's called Safe Dream." Then she grabbed a sheet of paper and began to draw with purple markers and fast strokes. A little girl stood in darkness, fog swirling, and beside her, holding her hand, was a tall figure with long golden hair. At the bottom, Lucy wrote in uneven letters, "Miss Hannah keeps me safe in the fog." She held it out proudly. "Can we hang it here?" Hannah nodded, her throat too tight to speak. They taped it beside the piano and outside the doorway. Mark stood silently watching. He had come down to grab a contract from the cabinet and had stopped at the sound of Lucy's voice. Now he stared at the drawing. He did not move for a long time. His daughter's smile, unguarded and full of light, was something he had not seen since Caroline died. It should have filled him with peace. Instead, it filled him with something else, a strange mix of awe and fear. Awe at what Hannah had done, reaching Lucy where therapy structure and even his own arms had failed. Fear because for the first time in years, he realized Lucy's healing might not come from him. He had worked so hard to be everything for her mother, father, protector. And now this woman, this accidental stranger, had slipped into the most fragile part of Lucy's world and made herself at home. Mark wanted to trust it. He wanted to believe it was okay, but his heart clenched at the thought of what would happen if Hannah left, if she vanished like Caroline had. He stepped back from the doorway and closed his eyes, then opened them again. Inside the room, Lucy laughed softly as Hannah played the final note of Safe Dream. It echoed tender and unfinished, like something that had only just begun. Rain tapped softly against the windshield as Mark pulled into the school pickup lane. The sky hung low and gray, blurring the world into soft silhouettes. He spotted Lucy under the awning, her small frame wrapped in a blue raincoat. Standing beside her was Hannah, soaked from the knees down her thin jacket, no match for the downpour. Mark leaned across the car and opened the passenger door. "Get in," he said gently. Hannah hesitated. "I'm drenched." "I have leather seats," he said with a tired smile. "It'll survive." She climbed in, brushing water off her hands. Lucy slipped into the back seat, already immersed in her drawing pad. They drove in near silence. It was not uncomfortable. It felt like understanding. Mark turned down the radio. The engine hummed. Rain pattered gently. "Thank you for staying with her," he said. "I didn't mind. She asked me to," Hannah replied. Mark nodded, his fingers tightening slightly on the wheel. Then after a pause, he spoke again. "My wife's name was Caroline. She was a nurse, brave, stubborn." He gave a short breath. "She got pregnant with our second, a boy. There were complications, but she kept working. Said people needed her. She smiled through everything right until the end." He fell quiet for a beat, then turned on the blinker. "I missed it. The signs, the way she stopped looking me in the eye. I thought I was helping by keeping our lives together, building something for us." His voice thinned. "She gave birth at 30 weeks. Our son didn't make it. She passed 3 days later. Blood clot, but the depression, it came first." The silence afterward wasn't empty. It was full, the kind of silence that held pain gently. "I'm sorry," Hannah said. Mark gave a small nod. "I don't talk about her much, but with you it feels easier." "I know what carrying too much feels like," Hannah said. He glanced at her. "My mom had a stroke when I was 20. I dropped out of college music school to take care of her. I'd barely made it through freshman year." "And your son?" "Noah's 5 ADHD, emotionally intense, bright as the sun, but some days I barely hold it together. She smiled faintly. His dad's never been in the picture. Mark studied her face not with pity, but a quiet respect. Then he turned back to the road. As they pulled into the driveway, the rain began to let up. The house glowed softly through the mist. He left the engine running. "She would have liked you," he said suddenly. "Who?" "Caroline." Hannah looked down. "You don't really know me." "Maybe not, but Lucy does, and I trust her instincts more than I trust most adults." They sat in silence again, the kind that felt like a breath held too long. Earlier that week, Hannah had caught a glimpse of a photo inside the house. Caroline smiling, holding baby Lucy. There was kindness in her eyes, the kind that lingered. If I were her, would Lucy accept me? The thought floated through Hannah like wind through trees. Mark reached over and shut off the engine. The stillness in the car was profound. "I don't think music heals," he said quietly. "Not completely. Not in the way people think." Hannah turned to him, waiting. "But maybe," he continued, "it's the first thread a way back, a sound that reminds us we're still here together." Raindrops slid down the windshield like slow-moving notes. Then from the back seat, Lucy's soft voice broke through. "Daddy, can we play the new song again later?" Mark looked at Hannah. "Yes, sweetheart," he said. "We will." The snow had begun to fall early that morning, soft, silent flakes dusting the streets in white. By the time Mark looked out from his office window that afternoon, the front path was already slick, the air gray and biting. He stood with his coffee in hand, absent-mindedly watching the end of the driveway when he saw her. Hannah. She was getting on her bicycle gloves, worn thin, her coat pulled tight against the wind. The wheels wobbled slightly on the icy street, her shoulders hunched with effort as she pedaled away, her silhouette shrinking against the blur of falling snow. Mark's brows furrowed. Something about the image stayed with him. Later that evening, while Lucy was asleep and the house quiet, he found himself standing in the kitchen with Mrs. Doyle. "She left on a bike?" he asked casually. The older woman gave a hesitant nod. "She always does not drive, lives somewhere off 8th and Elmore, the old housing complex." Mark knew the place. Transitional housing, one-bedroom units barely heated, mostly occupied by single mothers and families struggling to get by. He said nothing more that night. But when everyone had gone to bed, he sat at his laptop and typed. It did not take long to find what he needed. The next morning, he contacted a local outreach center that served low-income single parents. He arranged a quiet donation, 3 months of rent relief for a resident named Hannah Miles. No fanfare, no names. He asked them to include a small note printed on plain cardstock. "You've given my daughter something no school or doctor has. You made her feel safe. That's worth everything." He did not sign it. 3 days later, Hannah arrived at the house late. Mark had just finished a call when he heard the door open and the quick shuffling footsteps in the hallway. Mrs. Doyle called up to him, "She's here." But something felt off. Mark came downstairs to find Hannah standing in the entryway. Her cheeks flushed, her hair damp from sweat and melted snow. Her breath was still uneven, her hands trembling slightly as she removed her gloves. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I didn't want to miss today. My son, he had a rough morning. He wouldn't let go of me, and I couldn't find anyone to watch him." Mark stepped forward. "It's all right," he said softly. "You're here." Hannah lowered her gaze. "I should have called. I know that. It's just, I didn't want Lucy to think I left." She looked like she was bracing herself for disappointment, for judgment, for that tightening of the jaw people gave when they decided you were more trouble than you were worth. But it never came. Instead, Mark walked into the kitchen. A moment later, he returned with a mug of hot tea, steam curling from its surface. He placed it in her hands without a word. She stared down at it, confused at first. Then slowly her eyes began to well. "I don't know what I'm doing most days," she admitted. "I wake up and just keep moving. I have no plan, no backup. Just a little boy who needs me and 100 things I can't fix." Her voice cracked. Mark's tone was quiet, almost a whisper. "I once stayed up 9 months straight for a baby who never made it home." Hannah looked up sharply. Mark's face was unreadable, but his eyes told her everything. "I understand," he said. "Not all of it, but enough." She held the tea tighter. Her lip trembled. "No one's ever said that to me," she whispered. For a moment neither of them spoke. The silence between them was different this time. Not heavy, not painful. It was the kind of silence that says, "You're not alone anymore." From the other room, the faint sound of Lucy playing a soft melody drifted toward them. Hannah wiped her eyes and exhaled. "I should get to her," she said quietly. Mark nodded. But as she turned, something about the way she walked, just a little straighter, a little steadier, told him everything he needed to know. And when he went back upstairs, he opened his laptop again and typed another anonymous donation. Not because she asked, but because he had seen someone choose kindness when they had nothing to give, and that kind of courage deserved to be met with the same. The email arrived just after noon on a Wednesday at subject line stark, "Regarding Lucy's piano lessons." Mark glanced up from a meeting brief, his heart skipping. His assistant had requested credential verification from the music center. Attached was a roster of instructors assigned in recent weeks. Mark scrolled down. Amanda Rowan's name appeared beside Lucy's session slot. Hannah Miles was nowhere on the list. His pulse stilled. The room around him seemed colder, quieter. He closed the laptop with a soft click, breathing as though he had held it too long. Later that afternoon, Hannah arrived at the Bennett home wrapped in a scarf, her cheeks tinged pink from the drizzle. She carried a quiet hope with her. Mrs. Doyle greeted her warmly, but before she could reach the piano room, Mark emerged into the hallway. "May we speak for a moment?" he asked, his voice calm, measured. Hannah's stomach clenched. She nodded and followed him into the sitting room, past the gleaming hardwood floors and quiet hallways. Mark stood by the window, his arms relaxed but his eyes serious. He turned to her with a weight she felt immediately. "I got a message today from the center," he began. "I saw the list of instructors assigned. Your name wasn't on it." Hannah's chest tightened. She swallowed. "I wasn't supposed to be there that day," she said softly. "I was delivering food. The housekeeper thought I was the new teacher. I tried to tell her, but then I heard Lucy crying and I stayed." Her voice broke. She pressed her hands together. "I never wanted to deceive you. Yes, I needed the money, but I never meant to lie. I should have said something sooner. I'm sorry." Mark didn't respond right away. He simply held her gaze, calm, measured, waiting. Hannah's heart raced. "Please don't punish Lucy for this," she whispered. "I'll go. I'll leave. Just please don't take this away from her." He said nothing, turned his face slightly. The silence pressed in. "I really am sorry," she added, her voice trembling. She turned toward the door, ready to leave. But at that moment Lucy's voice rang out, small but fierce. "No!" Lucy appeared in the doorway, tears streaking her cheeks, fists clenched. "She didn't lie to me," she cried. "She didn't. Don't send her away. If you do, I'll be quiet forever again." Hannah froze, stunned. Mark stepped around the corner just as Lucy ran forward and wrapped her arms tightly around Hannah's waist. "Please," Lucy sobbed. "Don't take her away." Hannah knelt and held Lucy, rocking slightly. Her voice was a whisper. "I promise I'll always be with you," she said, placing one hand over Lucy's. "Right here." Lucy broke away and dashed to the piano. She climbed onto the bench, fingers trembling, and began to play. The melody was simple, halting, imperfect, but it was hers. It carried the name she whispered, "Safe Dream." The music drifted through the house, fragile and full of emotion. Mark stood in the doorway, silent, watching. Lucy's body shook. Tears tapped against keys, but she played on. In that moment, something inside him gave way. He had been so focused on correctness, on rules, on what was right. He had lost sight of what Lucy needed most: safety, trust, belonging. He watched her small figure at the piano, the notes trembling between the falling drops of rain in the night. Loss echoed in his chest, deep and raw. But beneath it was something softer, a longing to protect, to prevent that loss again. He realized now that Lucy, in her fragile courage, had given him the greatest gift, a chance to choose compassion over certainty. For the first time in years, tears threatened his eyes, and as the last note faded, he stepped forward. Lucy's eyes flicked toward him, torn between fear and hope. Mark did not speak yet. He just stood, letting the silence stretch, letting his presence speak instead. He had been right on paper, but he was wrong in heart, and now he would choose differently. The conference room buzzed with quiet tension. Executives shuffled through printouts and quarterly reports, while Mark sat at the head of the table, his fingers pressed together, elbows resting lightly on the polished wood. A presentation played on the screen in front of them. Charts, graphs, progress. Words like optimization and projections floated in the air. But Mark wasn't listening. His eyes drifted to the logo printed on the bottom corner of each slide. It was something he had designed himself years ago, when the company was just a dream, healing minds, honest hearts. 3 simple words. Back then they had meant everything. Now they felt like a quiet accusation. He stared at them until the room faded away. Then without a word he stood. "Mark," someone called as he moved toward the door. "I need to step out," he said, not looking back. He drove through light traffic, the streets gray and still damp from morning rain. His thoughts weren't loud, just steady pulsing like a heartbeat. He wasn't even sure where he was going until he found himself pulling into the school parking lot. Inside the front office, a kind-faced teacher recognized him immediately. "Mr. Bennett," she smiled. "You just missed pickup." "I'm not here for Lucy," he replied gently. "I just needed to ask about something." The teacher's smile softened. She led him to a wall where student projects were displayed, colorful drawings and music sheets tacked up with care. "She's been working on this all week," the teacher said, pointing to one particular sheet. "Titled it herself." Mark stepped closer. The handwritten title across the top read, "The Wrong Melody That Made Things Right." The staff lines below held a simple melody, halting, uneven, childlike. But what caught his breath was the drawing beneath it, a sketch of a man sitting on a bench beside a woman with long flowing hair. A child stood between them, holding both their hands. They weren't perfect likenesses, but he knew who they were. It was Lucy. It was him, and it was Hannah. He swallowed hard. She said, "It's about finding your way back when you're lost," the teacher added, almost as an afterthought. "Told us it's her safest song." Mark stared at the drawing for a long time. Then he quietly thanked the teacher, turned, and walked back to his car. On the way home, he found himself slowing near the community health center, the same one his company funded in part. Outside, through the large windows, he could see families sitting in the waiting area, children coloring at a low table. And in the corner by the window sat a little girl with a sensory headset on, quietly sketching with thick crayons. She rocked gently back and forth, humming under her breath. Her mother sat nearby, exhausted but patient, her eyes trained on the child's every move. No one would ever call that woman qualified. She was not a licensed therapist or a trained interventionist, but she was present, she was listening, and that Mark realized was the difference. Some people heal through expertise, others heal through love. He thought of Hannah, her quiet patience, the way she listened to Lucy without ever trying to fix her. The way she turned sorrow into song, fear into comfort. He thought of the drawing, the title, "The Wrong Melody That Made Things Right." Sometimes the wrong person was the right one, not because they had credentials, but because they cared. He placed his hand on the steering wheel, exhaled deeply, and turned the ignition. It was time to stop choosing what looked right and start choosing what felt right. The street was quiet when Mark pulled up to the small weathered house. The sun hung low, casting golden light on the peeling white paint and struggling garden out front. He stepped out of the car, his hands trembling not from the breeze but from hope. As he climbed the creaky steps, he heard faint music. Soft, imperfect notes floated from inside like someone remembering a song once loved. He knocked lightly. Hannah opened the door, surprised. Her hair was loosely tied, a worn sweater on her shoulders, flour dusting her hands. She didn't speak. Mark looked past her into the humble living room. Faded furniture, scattered toys, and a scratched-up second-hand piano. Above it, a crayon drawing showed a little house with 3 figures and the words, "Family is where someone listens to the music inside you." He stepped in. She let him. At the piano, Mark rested his hand on the keys. "I don't know how to play," he admitted, "but this is the first song Lucy taught me and the first one I've ever wanted to play for someone." He began the opening notes of Safe Dream. It was uneven, unsure, but honest. Every note carried grief, forgiveness, and something new, love. Tears welled in Hannah's eyes. She stepped forward and sat beside him, not to guide him, just to listen. When the last note faded, silence filled the space between them. "You didn't have to come," she whispered. "I know," he said, "but I had to." He turned fully toward her. Sometimes the heart just knows where it belongs, even if it takes a few wrong turns getting there. She laughed softly, tears falling freely. They said nothing more. They didn't need to. Days later, the local community center was filled with soft chatter and the rustle of programs. It was the Songs of the Heart fundraiser for Healing Minds. On stage, Lucy sat at the piano, her hands poised. Next to her stood Noah, clutching a tambourine, nervously smiling. Then they began to play The Wrong Melody That Made Things Right. The music was simple, slightly off rhythm, but full of heart. The crowd listened most, never knowing how much healing had gone into each note. Backstage, Mark and Hannah watched together. She wore a simple blue dress, her hair tucked behind her ears. Mark gently reached for her hand, their fingers intertwined. He didn't say, "I love you," not yet. But when their eyes met, the silence between them was enough, like a melody that needed no words to be understood. Thank you for watching this story of healing second chances and the quiet power of love. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories for more real-life inspired tales that remind us what truly matters. And if you believe in stories that heal and uplift the soul, hit the hype button to support our channel. Every like, comment, and share helps us bring more light into the world. Until next time, remember, sometimes the wrong melody is exactly what makes everything right. Soul-Stirring Stories, where every story touches a soul.